college football transfer portal is over. So now it's time to talk about teams like LSU, Texas, Alabama, and more from the SEC to see who was the winners and who was the losers of the transfer portal. This is part one of a 10-part video series I'm going to do where I cover each conference and I talk about the 3 or 4 teams I loved the most, the 3 or 4 teams I liked the least, and a few teams that just found some hidden gems along the way. So if you like this video and you want to see these kind of videos go into even more detail, just do me a small favor, hit the like button, subscribe. These videos take a lot of time to try to look into every single player that these teams got and lost. A lot of research, because you can't just look at stats with some of these guys. You actually got to dig into them. So this takes a lot of effort. So please, if you like it, just like the video, watch all the way through, see who I'm talking about next video, right? But today we're talking SEC football. Now, which team in the SEC had the best transfer portal? Typically, I hate going the chalk option, but when it's right, it's right. And the best team in the SEC, or the team that had the best transfer portal, is the LSU Tigers. Lane Kiffin and co. crushed the portal. Now, I do want to make a little note here that this is not me grading which teams have the best rosters now. That'll be a future video down past spring ball where I actually talk about every team's whole roster and coaching staff. Right now, we're just talking about which teams had the best portals based on the guys who they got and who they lost. And I think LSU is definitely the winner of at least the SEC, which, if you don't know what their portal index is, it's not necessarily their ranking. It's more so how good of players did you get compared to your roster from last year. So it's kind of like, did you actually get better? And then they also have the #1 portal class in 24/7's ranking, which is the typical ranking that you would consider. Now, I don't necessarily think LSU had the best players at any given position, right? They didn't get the best quarterback. I don't think so. They didn't get the best running back, receivers, linebacker. But when you look at the sheer volume of who they brought in, starting with Sam Leavitt, quarterback from Arizona State, anyone watching this video knows how good this guy is. Now, last year was kind of a down year. He had some injuries. He struggled a little bit, but he is ultra talented. My biggest question with Sam is, obviously we saw them take a big step backwards last year compared to the year before where they're giving Texas a run for their money in the playoff game. Makes you wonder, was Sam the leader of that team, or did Cam really make that big of an impact? I mean, Cam was the leader, but how much of that, him leaving, caused Sam to take a step back, or did he just have a down year? But overall, Sam he's not my QB1, but he is a top 3, probably maybe worst case 4 or 5 quarterback in this transfer portal. Lane Kiffin knows how to work with quarterbacks. I think Sam Leavitt is going to be awesome in LSU, and it's a great way to start off their portal. They also brought in a nice running back from Wisconsin, Dylan Jones. Now, Jones has had very little playing time in Wisconsin, so it's hard to base how good he is off of just stats. But like I said earlier, sometimes for these guys, you got to look past the stats into them as players. And if you just watch a little bit of his tape, if you just hear what people are saying about him, very good running back to add to this room. Now, is he going to be a clear-cut RB1? No, but just having a guy like this as your RB2/3, the depth, the rotations that you can get, very, very good pickup for LSU here. I think where LSU crushed it the most, though, is in the wide receiver room. Obviously, LSU is kind of known as wide receiver U, but last year they kind of had some disappointing guys, right? This year they brought in Kansas State Jace Brown. He's a top 10 in Kansas State's like receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. He was dominating the Big 12 last year. This dude is awesome. In reality, he might even be a top 5 receiver of this portal, and LSU brings him in as their new #1 guy. Speaking of talented, you have Trey Wilson III from Florida. Now, Trey has not really produced in his career. He's had a lot of injuries. He hasn't really been in a good system. So now we're looking at the talent versus production stand of things. And obviously, best case scenario, you have to find a fine line between the two. So I don't really know how well Wilson will actually fit into LSU here. Will he get past the injuries? Will he get past the lack of productivity? But he's extremely fast and explosive. I think he can be a very solid player for LSU. But I don't think he's going to be their second best receiver. I think that's going to be Jackson Harris out of Hawaii. This dude's 6'3", 205. He really led the Mountain West in receiving touchdowns and yards per catch. This dude can fly. He's big. He has great hands. Obviously, you question the transition from Mountain West to the SEC, but I think we've known at this point in time, unless you just refuse to believe it, these group of 5 players can play just as well as these Power 4 teams. You look at Indiana, who I'm recording this the day of the national championship game. They play tonight. I think Indiana's going to win. They got a bunch of these guys that came from group of 5s on that program. You want these older guys that have proven they can produce. Jackson Harris is him. But along with Jackson Harris, you also have Trey Brown III from ODU. Trey Brown was 3rd team All Sun Belt. He's 6'2", 180. He's from JUCO originally, then he went to ODU, and he had a really good standout season at ODU. So now you're looking at 4 really good receivers that LSU has brought over. But that's not all they brought over at the wide receiver position. They brought over 6 more receivers this portal outside of those 4, so 10 total. You know, and I think there's some hidden gems in this group outside of that 4 also. Roman Mothershed is one of those guys that he's from Troy, and he did not produce at all, basically. But he's 6'4", 208, massive dude. I really think if you put him in the right system, certain positions, he could be a great 3rd down and red zone guy. Trey Holloway was really productive at D2 West Florida. You have Winston Walken Jr. coming over from Ole Miss. You have some really potential guys here. So out of these 10, maybe they don't have a Cam Coleman, but do they supplement it with 3 or 4 guys that stand out? I think they do. That's where LSU really stood out this year, is they have so many good players they added versus 1 or 2 guys. They also brought in my favorite safety of this transfer portal is Ty Bennerfield from Boise State. Upcoming senior, has played in a ton of games in his career. He's been one of the best defensive players of the Mountain West. This dude can defend on the line. He can play make in the secondary. He can play all over the field. Like I said, a ton of experience. I think this guy's a great addition, along with linebacker TJ Daughtery from Ole Miss. He entered the transfer portal kind of late, but one of these couple Ole Miss guys that's following Lane Kiffin. Again, another guy who's seen a ton of games and experience, and he produces. Right? It's not like these are the last 2 guys, Bennerfield and Daughtery, just play games or they're just old. They play a lot of games and they produce. Filling out the defensive line, we have Stifling Green from Clemson and then Malik Blockton from Auburn. Both these guys, again, just guys that can get you playing time, be solid rotational players. I don't know if either of these 2 guys are going to be game record. They can rotate in and out with some of LSU's current defensive linemen. I think there'll be solid additions to this defense. And on the edge, we bring a guy who has not produced, Jordan Ross from Tennessee, but he's one of those guys that has a lot of potential. He's long. He's got really athletic abilities. You know, he was a high recruit coming out of high school. You kind of have a mixture of, we know what we're getting out of these guys, and we have some potential that maybe we can unlock it, you know? And that's kind of what you want if you're going to swing for the fences of a national championship, which that's LSU's aspirations, obviously. And while obviously Sam Leavitt is going to go into camp as that starter, LSU also brought in 2 additional quarterbacks. One is Hussein Longstreet, who was a really highly talented quarterback coming out of high school, went to USC, and he's still regarded as one of the best QBs in the transfer portal, even though he has no experience. They also brought in Landon Clark, who's kind of the opposite, a guy who was at Elon, an FCS school, who was balling out this year, one of the best FCS quarterbacks. So even though you don't expect either of these 2 guys to play, I definitely think just having them in that room to push Sam, just so he doesn't feel too content or too safe. In worst case, if he gets injured again, you have 2 options that you can go to at quarterback here. Now, one of the biggest problems, they're losing multiple key guys on the offensive line. You have Carius Kern, who's going to Ole Miss, actually, who he didn't play a ton last year, but he played enough, and he's a really young, future potential starter here. And losing him to a rival is definitely going to hurt. You're also losing Tyree Adams and Cohen Eccles to Texas A&M, 2 foundational pieces to this offensive line. And then a couple rotational guys there as well. So while LSU's line wasn't great last year, I don't think anyone doubts how important it is to have a veteran offensive line that has played well together or has played a lot of snaps together and has that chemistry. So losing 3 starters there is going to hurt. But they're bringing in a couple guys that have a lot of snaps, like Ali Ba, Sean Tompkins, and Jaquin Sprinkle. Probably botched some of those names there. 3 guys that, as you can see, have played a ton of snaps in their careers. You also bring guys like Devin Harper, William Satterwhite, and Jamar Jones as more rotational guys. So they are bringing in some very good guys to replace their departures. They just have to build that chemistry, especially with the new quarterback, new offensive coach. So there's a lot of new here. right? But that's typically for LSU and Lane Kiffin. He's done it before. I also normally wouldn't talk about potential additions, but we have 3 guys that LSU has been tied to that have not committed yet. So edge Princewell Umanali, he entered the transfer portal at the last minute, but then Ole Miss is like, not suing him, but like challenging it because his contract, so he's not in the portal. So I'm guessing he's going to stay at Ole Miss, but if something legal changes and lets him continue to be in the portal, he has ties to LSU. Just like wide receiver Caden Lee from Ole Miss. Still in the portal. He also has a couple ties to, I saw Georgia somewhere. I think I saw Texas somewhere, but LSU is in that conversation as well. Same as Jordan Seaton, the tackle from Colorado, who would be a massive addition to this line, to anyone's line. He's one of the best tackles in the country. I saw he was taking visits with Oregon and LSU. So as of right now, those 3 guys are not at LSU. Could they be by the time you watch this video? Maybe. My second favorite SEC team in the transfer portal is the Texas Longhorns, who were number 11 in On 3's portal index and number 2 in 24/7's portal rank. So the thing is with Texas versus LSU is, like I said, LSU kind of dominated by sheer numbers. Obviously, the guy they brought in, the guys are very talented, but I think Texas did a lot more bang for their buck. The guys they brought in are arguably all the best players that were available at their positions. Starting off with no one else other than Cam Coleman. The wide receiver out of Auburn was the hottest wide receiver on the market, right? He's ultra talented, he's big, he's got great hands, he's athletic. Has he been the most productive receiver? No. So that is something to question, is he being too highly ranked based on his like high school ranking as a wide receiver, right? But he's also playing at Auburn, who's obviously their offense has been very, very not good the past 2 seasons, so you got to give him some slack there. But he had 56 catches last year, 700 yards. That's pretty good for a team that couldn't throw the ball, right? And I do think he is the truest number 1 receiver Texas has had in a while. Like last year they had some good receivers, but no one that was great. The year before that, yeah, Matthew Golden was good, but he wasn't like a true number 1 to me. So I think Cam Coleman adds something to this team that they haven't had in a while. Then they went out and addressed the running back situation, because while the last couple years they've had good running backs, they haven't been able to run the ball. So they're really trying to change that. And I don't think that was all on the running backs per se, but bringing in really talented guys will help. Starting with Hollywood Smothers from NC State, a 2-year starter, one of the best running backs in the ACC the past 2 years. He is explosive. He could catch the ball out of the field. He's got enough size to him. He was generally considered the second or third best back in the transfer portal, probably behind Haynes. Isaac Brown would have been above him, but he went back to Louisville. There's a couple other guys, but he was one of the best running backs available in Texas. Like the wide receiver position, wanted to go for the best of the best versus volume. Luckily for them, in the running back room, they got a little bit of both, because they also brought in my second favorite running back, Raleek Brown. I like Brown more than Smothers. I think they'll complement each other really well. Now, Brown has less of a track history as Smothers. Obviously, in 2024, he barely played. He had a hamstring that was really bothering, but last year, he came on so explosive, over 1,000 yards on less than 200 attempts, 34 catches. He was doing everything for this Arizona State team. He looked awesome. So I don't necessarily think he can be a bell cow running back, but he doesn't need to be. With him and Smothers together, they can be one of the best duo running backs the SEC has now. So they really nailed the running back position to try and make a more balanced offense, to allow Arch to have a little less pressure on him and develop some play action, some RPOs. Overall, great design by them. But you can't run the ball without an offensive line, so they also addressed that as well. Starting with Melvin Siani, the star offensive lineman out of Wake Forest. Clearly you can see he's a multi-year starter, playing 11 games his freshman year, 12 games his sophomore year as a redshirt freshman sophomore. 600 and almost 800 snaps those 2 years. Didn't give up many sacks, didn't give up too many pressures. Yes, he played in the ACC. Yes, he played on a team that wasn't a dynamic offense, but I don't think there's any question that he will translate to the SEC level, right? He is just a great lineman. You're also bringing in a big upside guy in Jonte Newman. Now, Newman has barely played in his career so far, but he was a really good recruit coming out of high school. He's a big, big body. His coaches rave about his athletic ability and his potential. Now, potential is just a word. You got to make something do with it, but bringing in an upside guy like this for that line can be a true game changer, because having those big, just massive but skilled offensive line, we saw what it did for teams like a Miami, right? So it's worth taking the risk. So I love the Jonte Newman pickup for Texas also. And you also bring in a little more depth at the guard position. Dylan Skorsky out of Oregon State, he could start or could be a rotational guy. He's played at multiple different spots on the line. A very skilled and versatile lineman, right? So is he a splash pickup? No, but those are the kind of guys you want to add to an offensive lineman, experienced and tough. Then on the defensive side of the ball, you brought in the best linebacker in the transfer portal to replace Anthony Hill, right? Rasheem Biles from Pitt. This guy was a tackling machine the past 2 years. 101 tackles last year, 82 the year before. He gets sacks, he forces fumbles, he gets picks, he plays in the passing game. This guy can play all over the field. And you also brought in Justin Cryer from Florida State. So this is your new linebacker duo, right? Cryer isn't quite as explosive and all over the place as Biles, but he's still a very, very reliable linebacker. Has played in a lot of games for Florida State. You know, he's one of their key defensive players. So it is far from like a lackluster pickup. This guy's a true rotational player on that defense. And speaking of rotational, you're bringing Ian Gifford from Arkansas, just a big body defensive lineman that can rotate in with those linemen, that can help relieve some guys, keep everyone fresh. You know, it's always good to have those big bodies up front. Is he going to be a game wrecker on that line? No, but he's very, very good. And you will notice him in games if you're watching Texas. Then to wrap up Texas's additions, Bo Masco out of Rutgers. I think this is a really solid pickup. Again, he's not a superstar corner. He's not like the best corner in the portal, but he's been a full-time starter the last 2 years for Rutgers. So this guy's going to start in play, or just at least play a lot for Texas in that secondary. Like the big men up front, it's always good to have a bunch of depth at that position. And he is a very talented player. So great pickup for them on that defense side of the ball as well. The biggest loss for Texas is linebacker Leona LaFou. So they're losing Anthony Hill Jr. to the draft, but they're also losing LaFou, who's going to Colorado. He was the number 2 linebacker. As you can see, he played in 12 games. He had almost 70 total tackles or combined tackles. He had a couple tackles for loss, a sack. So he wasn't like the game changer on that side of the ball, but he's a very reliable linebacker, very good player. But that's why they brought in the 2 linebackers in the portal to replace this guy. You're also losing all 3 of your main backs from the past couple years. Trey Wisner, CJ Baxter, and Jarrett Gibson are all 3 are very talented backs, but they had their combination of problems of injuries / just couldn't find the holes very well. You know, overall, it wasn't working in Texas. And sometimes that happens for skilled players, but they brought in 2 running backs who I personally like more than those 3 guys. So I think Texas continues to upgrade their team. Just like at the wide receiver position, losing 2 guys of DeAndre Moore Jr., Parkin Livingston, 2 very good players. There's no doubt about it, but you look at someone like Cam Coleman, clearly more talented, right? So even though maybe the production from Cam hasn't been that much better than one of these guys, the talent is obviously there, and you take the talent a lot of times. And they really didn't lose too much on the offensive line either. Nick Brooks, Connor Stroth, a couple more rotational guys, but they didn't lose too many snaps from that side of the ball. They're bringing in some new guys as well to replace this. So overall, Texas is my second favorite overall portal class. They brought in some true game changers, some true difference makers. While the volume wasn't there like in LSU, I like their individual players better. My third favorite transfer portal from the SEC teams is a little more unorthodox. Well, not unorthodox, but they're on here for a little different reasons, but some of the same. That's the Ole Miss Rebels, right? The biggest reason that I have Ole Miss here is actually because they didn't let as many of their star players leave to go to LSU or any school, but obviously, as soon as Lane Kiffin took that job, people were speculating that the almost entire Ole Miss team, everyone that was eligible to come back, a team that just almost went to the national championship game, was going to go to LSU. And yes, a couple of them did, but for the most part, none of them were super key contributors. Obviously, TJ Daugherty hurts. Obviously, Caden Lee transferring hurts. A couple more guys we'll talk about, but overall, Ole Miss was able to keep the majority of their team intact. Along with that, they brought in some pretty interesting guys. Starting off with quarterback Deuce Knight from Auburn. Deuce is another one of those quarterbacks that we haven't seen, right? We don't actually know if he is going to pan out as he's supposed to. We also don't even know if we're going to see him this year. So As from what I know right now, and comment below if you guys know better than me, Trinidad is still unsure if he'll be able to play next year. He sued to get an eligibility. Now, from what I know, it sounds like how long the process takes, it won't be until after the season until they have a ruling. Don't know if that's true, but it sounds like he's playing next year. But bringing in someone like Deuce Knight, who is very young, very talented, high prospect to be a backup for Trinidad, to learn to be a future role, very good addition. Probably won't help this year. But someone that might help this year is Carius Kern. He's a tackle / guard from LSU. We just kind of mentioned him a little bit ago. Very young player, upcoming true sophomore, but he had 305 snaps as a true freshman. So clearly, even though he wasn't a starter, there's a lot of talent there. LSU wouldn't be putting him on the field if he wasn't very talented. Ole Miss is really trying to up that offensive line, and they're proving that by bringing in Troy Everett, the center from Oklahoma. Now, last year he only played one game before a season-ending injury, but in his career he has almost 1,500 snaps played. He is so experienced. He has been around the block. He has seen multiple offenses, worked with multiple quarterbacks, coaches. Even if he's not your full-time starter, bringing in that kind of guy to your room can never hurt. So Ole Miss really made sure to address the offensive line by bringing in those two guys. They're also bringing in a pair of wide receivers from Syracuse, Daryl Gill and Jonte Cook II. I like Gill a little more, but both of these guys are very interesting, very talented players. Gill really flourished this year, having 5 touchdowns, 500 yards in a Syracuse offense that definitely took a step back. I think he's a very, very talented player, but so is Cook. Cook actually had the better statistical season when it comes to yards. Not as many touchdowns, but we know touchdowns can be kind of fluky. So I don't know if both of these guys will contribute to this Ole Miss team right away, but at least one of them very well should. And it never hurts to have extra depth in that wide receiver room. And an interesting running back that I was looking into is Joshua Dye from Southern Utah. He was at UTEP, didn't really pan out there, so he went to Southern Utah, and he exploded on the scene. Almost 300 attempts, almost 2,000 yards, and 28 rushing touchdowns. And yes, I get he's playing at a lower level, but he's also playing behind offensive linemen that are at a lower level. He's also playing with a quarterback at a low level. I think this guy can ball. He has some really good tape on him. He has some really good explosiveness. Yes, it might have took him a little bit to get going. Didn't pan out at UTEP, but I think this guy won't be a cowbell back. We know they already got one of those, right? But an addition to the running back room can be very huge for Ole Miss. But I think where Ole Miss stood out in this portal is the defensive side of the ball. Starting with Keaton Thomas, a very underrated linebacker out of Baylor. He's not as high up on these recruiting rankings websites, but I don't really care about that. This guy's a ball hawk. He flies around the field, getting tackle after tackle after tackle. He might not be a superstar in coverage, but he can hold his own enough. Great against the run. Very good addition to this defense. They also brought in 3 new interior defensive linemen. The first one I want to talk about is Jemiah Otis. He is my upside guy. I think this is the most talented of the 3, but he also has a ton of problems with injuries. Only played 6 games last year, 1 game in 24, and in 23, as a true sophomore, he played 13, had a very good season. So obviously he needs to overcome the injury bug. He needs to stay consistent and healthy. But if he does, I think he will be a disruptor for this defensive front. But if he doesn't stay healthy, the other 2 guys, the first one being Jordan Renard from Alabama. This guy's kind of the opposite. He plays in all the games. 12 games last year, 15 games this year. He also is pretty disruptive. He gets to the ball. He doesn't get out after the quarterback, but he gets to the ball on the run. He eats it up in the middle. And you're throwing him in with Makai Borough from Florida. Might have pronounced that wrong, but a younger guy, just coming off 2 pretty good seasons at Florida, got a decent amount of playing time. So with the 3 of those guys, I think they found a really good defensive lineman group here to play, right? Then you also bring in Blake Purchase from Oregon, a edge rusher. Hasn't really panned out yet. This year, he definitely started to kind of step it up a little bit, getting some more tackles, stopping the run a little better, getting after the quarterback a little bit. Overall, he's not an elite edge rusher by any means, but he can set the edge, he can stop the run. So if he continues to work on those pass rushing moves, could be a very, very big pickup. Someone who I think is a very underrated pickup, though, is Jonathan Maldonado from Nevada. He's an upcoming senior, 15 games last year, 5 sacks, 9 tackles for losses. Is he going to lead the SEC in sacks? No, but I think he could be a good situational pass rusher that can really get after the quarterback, or I think he could be an every down guy as well if some of their other edge guys don't pan out. So I think he can kind of be very versatile for them, kind of give them what they need, what they want, and I think he'll be a real impact player for Ole Miss. You also bring in a guy like Jay Crawford, who played 11 games both the last 2 seasons. This Auburn defense was very good last year, despite how bad they were as a team. So bringing in a corner from them, never a bad idea. This guy can play. But the really big moves that Ole Miss made this year was at the safety position. Edwin Joseph from Florida State and Jonel Aguro from Georgia. Both these guys have a ton of experience. Both these guys can wreck games. They can get behind the line. They can play they can play farther back. They can guard running backs, slot receivers, tight ends. They are versatile. I mean, if you're getting a safety or any kind of defensive player that played under Kirby Smart, you're getting a player that is very well coached, has experience, knows what he's doing. So I think both those guys can be key contributors in the secondary. And Ole Miss revamped their defense this year. Ole Miss should still have a very elite defense under Pete this year. Now, Lane did take a couple guys to Ole Miss, including Devin Harper, a guard, and like I already mentioned, TJ Daugherty and Winston Watkins Jr. But there's a couple more guys. Obviously, Princely, as of right now, is staying at Ole Miss, but like I mentioned, that could be changing. And then Caden Lee's leaving. But overall, they did a great job at not letting Lane poach the team, which was a big question mark, right? They also lost a couple key contributors, like a Deshaun Womack. One of their main edge rushers is going to Auburn. They also lost quarterback Austin Simmons, who wasn't going to play if Trinidad comes back. You're also losing a couple guys in the secondary, TJ Banks, Ricky Fletcher, Chris Graves Jr. 3 very, very experienced players, but like I already mentioned, you're bringing in some more guys in that secondary to help replace that. And then a couple guys on the offensive line that are just rotational guys. I already mentioned the offensive linemen they're bringing in. So overall, Ole Miss and Pete did a great job at replacing the guys that are losing and preventing a mass exodus of players leaving the team, right? So Ole Miss, I thought, had a phenomenal transfer portal era. I have them at number 3 in the SEC for that. They absolutely crushed it. Then my 4th SEC team of the transfer portal is Texas A&M, right? Starting off with bringing in a new wide receiver 1, Isaiah Horton. Texas A&M kind of missed having that big, reliable target for Marcel Reed. Isaiah Horton does that. 56 catches this year, 42 catches this year, 56 the year before. He's get the yards, he got some touchdowns. Is he an elite wide receiver 1? No, but he's good enough for Marcel Reed, for that offense, to really have that offense take its step forward. I also think they brought in a really good tight end out of Tulsa, Richie Anderson. Has he put up the greatest stats in the world yet? No. But I think he's a very underrated guy that can bring in some dynamic play. You can have him run some big sets, or you can put him off in the slot a little bit for some mismatches. Improving the offensive line, we have a couple guys here. The first one, Wilkin Formby from Alabama. Huge guy. Played 15 games last year, almost 900 sacks. He had a handful of games the year before that too. So he's become pretty experienced in the SEC. Massive guy. Great addition as a tackle there at Texas A&M. To add with the 2 LSU guys that we kind of already talked about earlier. Tyree Adams and Cohen Eccles from LSU. Both very, very reliable linemen, both experienced. These two, along with Formby, will create a great offensive line in addition to what A&M already has there. They really targeted the trenches this portal. They're also bringing in one of the higher upside but risks of the portal, Ricky Gibson III, one of the best corners in football in 24, but last year only played 1 game because of injury. You have to make sure that he's good to go, which they obviously checked everything to make sure. But if he can get back to that 24 form, this defense that was very good this year becomes even more elite next year. You're also bringing in a safety to help that secondary out of Colorado, Twyfik Bayard. He's an upcoming redshirt junior. Last year, he had a hell of a season. He got a handful of tackles, multiple pass deflections, got an interception, a fumble, proving he can kind of play all over the field, right? You're also bringing in a very good edge rusher, Anto Saka from Northeastern. Is he going to blow you away with his sack numbers? No, but he can get after the quarterback enough. He can stop the run enough to be a solid rotational piece on that line, right? You also bring in 2 new defensive linemen, right? CJ Mims from North Carolina had 42 total tackles last year, 20 of them solo, 2 sacks, 2 tackle for losses. He can show his ability to create some pressure from the interior. In Angelo McCollum from Illinois. Not quite as a disruptor, but another guy that can eat up the middle of the line, stop the run, just cause some, eat up some bodies, right? That's what you're looking for in that defensive line sometimes. Just someone that can eat bodies. But their big addition on the front might be Ryan Henderson from San Diego State. Now, again, we're talking about a guy that was at a group of 5, going to the SEC, but I think it translates. This guy can get after the quarterback. 7 sacks last year. 9 tackle for losses, so he stops the run and gets after the quarterback. I would not be surprised if he ends up being one of their better additions this year from the Aztecs. They didn't really lose too many people in this portal either. You have Jonte Newman, who we just talked about, Texas. Again, he didn't really play last year, but he has that upside that you would like to keep, develop, put on this line, but you replaced him pretty easily with those 3 massive signings, right? And then you lose a couple rotational front 7 guys, Dylan Evans, Solomon Williams, Ryan Kennedy. None of those guys really shake the roster that much. They're just rotational guys. And then some pass catchers like Theo Millen Offstrom, very good tight end, but not the worst thing in the world. And Isaiah Williams, you're not really going to miss. So Texas A&M brought in some key guys, but they didn't lose anyone. So kind of like Texas, they went for more bang for your buck. Not a big class, but a very reliable class, right? So Texas A&M had a very good portal. I liked what they did. Now for my least favorite transfer portals in the SEC, I'm kind of being harsh on a couple of these teams because I'm going to be more critical of a team that has the resources, that has the current roster, and has the aspirations for national championship, but they go and do nothing, right? To me, that's just as bad as letting a bunch of people go. So my least favorite SEC team of the transfer portal is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, again, this isn't me saying they're the worst team in the SEC. This is based on just their transfer portal ins and outs, right? Let's look at their offensive losses. They lost arguably their best receiver. I know Ryan Williams is like the guy, but he's been very disappointing this year. So Isaiah Horton was very reliable, and you're losing him. You're also losing a bunch of other receivers that are depth guys. Not really big losses. They didn't really do much this year, but still. You're also losing key tackle that we just talked about, Williams Formby, 816 snaps there at the tackle position. And then you're losing some depth guys, Montgomery, Ayonta, Alien, Anugwam, Du Bois. A lot of names mispronounced there, but a lot of offensive line snaps or rotational pieces you don't have anymore, right? So you better hope you brought in some guys to get those backup positions filled. On the defensive side of the ball, you're losing a guy like James Smith, Jordan Renard, linebacker Corey Rasal, edge rusher Keon Keeley, linebacker Kelby Collins, corner Cameron Calhoun. Now, are these your best defensive players on your team? No, but all of these guys played key spots for you or were key rotational pieces, right? So you're either losing starters or rotational guys all over the defensive side of the ball. What did Alabama bring in to fix their problems? They brought in a couple linemen, Nick Brooks, 221 snaps last year, Racine Delgado after Cal Poly or out of Cal Poly. Ton of experience coming from a smaller school. You'll see how that translates. And another couple rotational guys. Wide receiver Noah Rogers from NC State, I really like. I think he's a solid player. But is he going to replace Isaiah Horton? Probably not. And then guys on the defensive line, Devin Tompkins, Terrence Green, both very, very good players. But are they going to be the game wreckers that you need to be beating an LSU, to beat a Texas, right? I just don't think they're getting this production out of these new guys. So Bama is my least favorite SEC transfer team because of who they didn't bring in. Another team I'm not very high on from their portal is Vanderbilt. The Commodores are coming off their best season ever, almost making the playoffs. We found out that they have a lot of money, actually. They have some resources. They're starting to get some momentum. They're starting to build a name for themselves. They're really starting to, become a relevant team. But then in this transfer portal, you kind of do what Alabama does. You don't really lose that much, but you didn't gain anything. You lost wide receiver Trey Richardson, who was one of your main offensive weapons last year. You lost 2 depth offensive line guys, a couple receivers, 2 quarterbacks, a running back, and a tight end. On the defensive side of the ball, you lost Linus Zunk. You lost Randon Funninty. You lost Trudeau Berry. All 3 of those guys are key players on your defense. So now you have a team that was already losing a lot of guys to graduating / the draft, and you're losing some key players, a key receiver, a couple guys on defense. But what do you bring in to replace it? Well, I will say Ricardo Jones is a very, very good player. I like him a lot. Good experience, got after the ball, 6 interceptions last year. You have Brian Allen, you have Edwin Kalinge, but overall, you're not bringing in enough to keep competing in the SEC. Ja'Cory Thomas out of Old Dominion could be a very, very good receiver for them. But who's throwing him the ball? They didn't go get a quarterback. Yes, they got the Jared Curtis, the 5-star freshman. Maybe they started him right out of the gate as a true freshman. Risky, but that also might be the key to keeping some of these 5-star freshmen on your team more than a season or two, is by actually playing them versus developing them how you used to. You brought in a tight end that actually liked decently. I don't think it was the worst transfer portal in the world, but when you look at what Vanderbilt is aspiring to be, a new SEC contender, I thought it was a very disappointing transfer portal. So that's why I have them as my second least favorite SEC team. And then third, kind of following up Bama and kind of Vanderbilt, I have a team that, again, you have championship aspirations. You have to go out and make some splashes, spend money. We know you have the money to go get players. And yes, you might not like the fact that you have to spend to compete. Maybe you want to be true to yourself, but Texas doesn't care, LSU doesn't care, Indiana, Texas Tech, Miami, all these other schools, they don't care, right? So if you want to compete, you got Gunnar Stockton, a great quarterback, but this is your last year you're going to have him. You have to capitalize, get more on your team. You're losing your star safety, Jono Aguero. You're losing a guy like Chris Jones, several corners like Dominique Kelly, Andre Evans, Daniel Harris. You're losing multiple important guys on that defense. You're also losing 4 guys on the offensive line. Now, are they 4 key starters? No, but Bob Hewley will actually be missed on that team. He played a good amount of snaps. You're losing your depth of your team. But again, I'm not criticizing Georgia's transfer portal because of their losses. I'm criticizing Georgia's transfer portal because of their lack of additions. You're bringing a guy like Isaiah Cannon, 33 catches, 400 yards, 4 touchdowns. Pretty good year, but is he going to win you the SEC and the national championship? No, you're bringing a new running back, Dante Duato. Running back isn't a problem. I like this guy a lot. 12 touchdowns in 2024. But is he going to win you the national championship? No. Bringing in guys like Amarius Williams and Gentry Williams, 2 very good defensive players. But Gentry Williams has only played 8 games the last 2 years. So is he the difference maker? Is Kalari Barnes the difference maker? Again, very good player. 4 interceptions 2 years ago. He's a ball hawk. He goes after players. He's a tackle machine. But he's not the difference maker that you need to compete with an LSU nowadays, with an Ole Miss, Miami, Indiana. You get what I'm saying? Is that like Georgia, they were so close this year, right? But they're missing adding these impact players that are already established in college. I respect them for wanting to go the route of mostly homegrown players. And Georgia's the kind of school that can still be a top 1 to 3 team in the SEC. But I think to actually go through the entire playoffs, to make a run, you got to bring in more guys in the transfer portal that can be superstars, as starters, etc. So those were my least favorite transfer portal teams of the SEC. Now to finish this video, a couple of sneaky pickups, right? A couple teams that just added some guys that I really appreciate and am looking forward to. Auburn, Golish, and the boys are coming to town, bringing in multiple guys from USF. Obviously, Byron Brown is the best quarterback Auburn has had since Bo Nix. And even Bo Nix in Auburn wasn't great. He was much better at Oregon. He was very good. But you get what I'm saying. Bring in 2 offensive linemen, wide receiver like Singleton, and a wide receiver like Nimrod. I know Singleton was kind of like the main guy there. Watch out for Nimrod. That guy is a blazer. He's a speedster. Very excited for him. You're also bringing in one of my favorite running backs in the portal, Bryson Washington from Baylor. This dude, 2 years ago, over 1,000 yards on just 175 carries, 12 touchdowns, a down year. the next year, but still almost 800 yards on just 154 carries. One of the best running backs in the portal. I think could be one of the best running backs in the SEC. That guy can fucking play, right? Trust me. Couple offensive linemen, Joseph Simmons from JMU, Jake Laurier. Their offensive lineman is coming together. The quarterback, they got the receivers, their running backs, their offensive line. Auburn's offense is probably going to be very good. I'm looking forward to it. And their defense was great last year. If they can kind of carry that over, got a couple guys like Walter Mathis Jr., Deshaun Womack from Ole Miss. Auburn's got a team putting together right now, okay? Just like Florida does. Florida has actually, obviously they're bringing some guys over from Tulane, right? They're also bringing a handful of guys with their offensive coordinator from Georgia Tech. Aaron Philo. Now, we don't really know exactly how good he's going to be. Hasn't really played, but I've heard good things about him. I've heard he can play. We'll see. Eric Singleton Jr. from Auburn, but he was from Georgia Tech 2 years ago, right? So now we're looking at Florida, obviously, like I said, Tulane, but they're also bringing a lot of guys from Georgia Tech system. The key to that is we see it in college football nowadays. Chemistry and experience can win you championships, can make you go to the playoffs, etc. This Georgia Tech crew will be very key contributors to Florida. We also bring in a great safety from Baylor, DJ Coleman, a really good running back, London Montgomery, and a running back, Evan Pryor as well. And then Kentucky. Kentucky has a lot of upside, but a little more risk versus the last two teams. Kenny Minchie from Notre Dame, high recruit, haven't seen him yet. Don't really know, but a lot of people are still very high on him. So he could be the quarterback of the future. You're also bringing in a guy like CJ Baxter. Already talked to him about Texas. Very talented back, just a lot of injuries. We'll see if you can get over them. Then you got a running back like Javante Barnes, though, who can kind of help offload that a little bit. 31 career games in 4 years, has overall good stats, per attempt. Just got to see him do that in one season. A couple more guys like Colton Price, Lance Harold. Some offensive line is coming along in Kentucky as well. Then the last team I want to talk about is Arkansas. You got a lot of guys moving from Memphis, AJ Hill, Sutton Smith, two very key players there. You're also bringing in some stud offensive linemen of Davian Weatherspoon and Bryant Williams. But I love the wide receiver Chris Marshall out of Boise. Didn't really get to showcase how talented he is. But you're also adding some guys on the defensive side of the ball. Christian Harrison, Jamonte Waller, House, Roland. Arkansas, you're not going to win the SEC, right? But I do think better times are ahead of you of just not being a bottom dweller anymore. And that's what you wanted out of Ryan Silverfield. You just want to have some consistency and be somewhat competitive. That's going to happen next year. So this is my SEC transfer portal. I talked about some good, some bad, some fun. If I didn't mention your team, that means you're just in the middle, right? I had nothing really to say. Every team had a couple guys that I really like. Every team I had a couple guys that didn't really care for. It's hard to read into every single one of these players that goes in and out of every conference. These take a while. My next video is going to be the Big Ten. We got Indiana playing in the national championship game tonight. We got Penn State. We got Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan. How are they doing in the portal? I'm going to try to get that video out before the end of the week. Again, these take a while. So please, if you like it, if you want to see more of the videos of the series, more conferences, please just like, subscribe, and hit the noti bell for the Big Ten.